Hey guys, welcome to HipHughes History. What we would like to do in the next few minutes for you is serve up two early African-American civil rights leaders, Booker T. Washington and W.E. Du Bois. Now, this is perfect if you're in 8th grade, if you're in high school, even if you're lost on the internet. You might even be crazy on the internet. But either way, we're going to do like a surface, guys, a surface skimming of the facts here and kind of the topical ideas of these two early African-American civil rights leaders. So please, don't use this if you're like writing a big research paper or if you're like a doctor or something. What the hell are you watching me for? All right, giddy up, let's go. Beep, beep, learning. So let's take a look at Booker T. Washington first. I've always done this silly drawing to kind of at least get the visual concept down of Booker T. Washington, and you kind of can see this guy in kind of overalls, kind of ready to go to work. And that's really the big concept. One of the things they're going to have in common is, look, they're both for equality. Booker T. Washington is for equality, but his type of equality is kind of a long-term equality. He's thinking down the road. So he's telling African Americans that we need to kind of put up with racism in a sense, and work within the system in order to get out of the hole, out of the racist hole. So he's telling people, Tuskegee Institute, vocational education, go to work, get a job. And he gave a very famous speech called the Atlantic Compromise speech in 1895, where he's telling African Americans to work within the system. You shush up a little bit. And, not only is this kind of maybe advice because, of his experiences with the violent racism of the South and he doesn't want people to get hurt and that kind of idea, but he's seen favorable from within government circles because he's telling African Americans not to rebel rouse, not to shout and protest, but to kind of be quiet and, do what they got to do. He's the first African American invited to the White House. I think it was Teddy Roosevelt who would ask him for advice, and Howard Taft. So he is kind of the inside system African American. So now let's take a look at W.E.B. Du Bois. W.E.B. Du Bois ain't gonna wait for civil rights. Now, if we're doing a Venn diagram, kind of the overlapping circle idea is that they both want civil rights. But you saw, Booker T. Washington and Tuskegee Institute, vocational education, work now, kind of the overall idea. W.E. Du Bois, maybe because he's born in the North and he experiences freedom as a young boy, he's not going to wait for freedom. He's telling African Americans that we need to fight, or they need to fight for their rights because it's constitutional, and that nobody needs to wait for freedom. Kind of the John Locke idea. So he is going to start the Niagara movement, and that blossoms into the NAACP, which is a legal organization which is going to fight for civil rights for African Americans. He's the first African American to get his doctorate from Harvard University. But that's the major differences right there. African American civil rights is the commonality. Booker T. Washington is work now, worry later, right? W.E.B. Du Bois is civil rights now, NAACP, and the Niagara movement. So look, there's tons of other stuff that you should know, which is really, really interesting, whether it's the Tuskegee Institute later being used by the government to inject syphilis into African American servicemen to test it on them, or whether it's the socialism and the communism and the McCarthyism that W.E.B. Du Bois has to kind of deal with in the 1950s. Really interesting cats that you could learn a lot about. But right there, you got the major idea. What I would like you to do now is I would like you to touch the button underneath that is going to have all these awesome links, including one that says subscribe, because you should subscribe, and then visit the other EDU gurus and all the other awesome EDU pages that are listed below. So that's it. Giddy up. We'll see you next time on HipHughes History.